Hey, everybody, welcome to our weekly ecosystem office hours call. I am your host, Jinx, and joined as always by the best and brightest in the Pocket ecosystem. I am still fighting off what we are calling the Denver flu, so apologies in advance for any congestion and coughing sounds. Let's start things off today with ecosystem updates from Gabby.
Hello, everyone. All right. So from the marketing side of things, where's my list here? All right. So we have a couple of pieces of major content we want you to have a look at and support. So the first is an op-ed piece published in Cointelegraph. It was published under Mike's name. Apologies, Arthur. It has him listed as the CEO of Grove because they pulled it from his LinkedIn. I've already submitted the correction, so we will fix that. But anywho, I will post the link to the article here in the chat. The second second piece of content is a podcast episode that Jinx was on. He was talking about unstoppable open data, and we hope that you will give it a listen. And last item on my list is a shout out to Grove for the hustle on the XRPL support and partnership. It's been really great to see that come to fruition and driving some extra eyes to the network. And thank you also for adding some new public endpoints to our ecosystem. And that's it from me.
Yeah, seconded on all the above. The content is good. Get out there, interact with it, and check out those new endpoints. I believe that Grove is the only provider who is offering XRPL EVM endpoints right now. So if you're trying to play in that ecosystem, you want to get up on that. Oh, excuse me. I'll try to be a little faster on the mute button next time. So with that, let's go to protocol updates with Fred.
Thank you, Jinx. I will be relatively quick today because our current mode at Grove is we're calling it ruthless prioritization. We are really just trying to land our two planes here. So on the Shannon front, first off, we are proud to announce that we have our very own ChatGPT built website, but more importantly, it hosts archival snapshots. So I'm going to paste that in the chat. If you need a snapshot for anything Shannon related, it is on that website. Definitely for the UX people in the room, it gives those jQuery vibes, but it's functional, and that's what matters for software and nodes. So very happy about that. We recently finished the upgrade on beta testnet to 0.013. So if you're out there and you're running a node, you will need to upgrade if you're not using Cosmovisor, which does it automatically for you. The big thing on the horizon for us right now is really just the load testing, and we are looking to achieve, a massive amount of scale, really prove out the capabilities of the protocol. No hard date set for that yet, but as we get closer, we'll either announce it or share the results as always. And then really the only other thing that we're focused on beyond load testing on the protocol is migration. And we're just very heads down in the migration. We're working on the migration CLI and testing of that CLI and then documentation to make sure that anyone who needs to and wants to move their funds from Morse to Shannon can do so easily. I'm going to scoot right down into Path. Again, focuses are pretty narrow here. We're just focusing on getting Path to a point where it is QoS parity with the portal, QoS parity or better. And then from there, we'll begin shadowing traffic. We are in the final reviews of pushing and deploying our Guard add-on, which is kind of the user database and the service management piece. So that's very exciting. And then kind of on the more internally focused, but also very much publicly available, is starting to build out some hooks for a data pipeline for any users of Path. So we need to integrate with our legacy data pipeline, but the hooks here should be able to integrate well with whatever you might want to do with your data from Path. So very exciting feature coming forward, especially for me, the resident data geek here. Lastly, just on the ecosystem front, like Jinx said, and like Gabby said, we've got our public endpoints. We're very excited about our XRPL EVM testnet public endpoint. So if you want to play, like, let's go. You burn them up. It's relays on the network. They're there for you. And of course, if you want to convert from there, you can always get a free endpoint through Grove. And the biggest things beyond that are just really focusing in on partnerships with existing partners and expanding other partnership opportunities. We are going to be trying to look at partnerships with some infrastructure providers as we get closer to Path and Shannon, that you might be able to scare up some freebies there. So more to come on that, and if we have anything to share, we of course will. That's it. Short and sweet today. Thanks, Jinx.
Awesome. All of those are great updates, and we are happy to hear them. It's exciting getting into this head down phase as we move closer and closer towards the launch. Art, any additional Grove updates you want to share?
I just want to clarify the public endpoints piece. So 18 months ago, we shut down all of the public endpoints because it was burning a hole in our pocket. But since then, we've adjusted all of our infrastructure and the infrastructure spend, so we have more of a handle of it. And in doing a bunch of load testing in the last few months, we figured out what all of this is going to cost us. So for Oasis Radix and XRPL specifically, we have partnerships with them, so they are paying for these. Use it or lose it for all three of those. For Celestia, it's actually cheaper for us to run these public endpoints than it is to pay the F-chain subsidy. So we open these up in the hope that we can get organic traffic pushing this through, so we can drop the subsidy for the four Celestia chains. Overall, so what happened with Celestia specifically is we had a grant as one of the launch partners for the chain from last summer until December, but that grant expired. But overall, there was always very little traffic, even though Celestia advertised this endpoint, and even though it was in their docs for a good period of time. So we've decided to kind of continue with the public RPC coming out of our own pocket, just to be able to drive traffic to Celestia. And we'll keep it up for as long as it makes sense, because we still hold the belief that having a long tail of change, in which Celestia is from a usage perspective, maybe not from a marketing perspective, does make sense for the network. I'll stop there.
Yeah, appreciate that, and good to know for anybody who was looking for those endpoints or needs a place to interact. Then go check those out and make sure they're worthwhile. Okay, and I don't think that we have any other major updates aside from that. I will say that we are working in an ongoing fashion to help finalize the migration plans and migration documentation. We are going through the actual upgrade requirements this week from an ecosystem perspective, and trying to make sure that we have a handle on both what's required from an individual and node runner perspective, and also to see what additional tooling can be built out to help support that and automate as much of the process as possible. So stay tuned for additional updates on that, most likely next week. And on that, I will open up the floor. I saw some questions getting batted around the den and such this morning, so if anybody would like to take the mic, you are welcome to do so.
If you want, I can go through Tim's questions. I have answers for some, but not all of them.
Sure.
All right. So for anyone listening, Tim posted a shit ton of questions in the Telegram this morning. So I will answer the ones that I can or am able to. Cool. So are we going to see gateways and apps flying in? From a path perspective, right, that's the tooling that should enable gateways. We are working very, very closely with Liquify. They open up tickets for us, or they give us feedback. We open tickets, we prioritize them immediately, and we fix them. And Fred would know better here, so feel free to interject. But I think the last of those tickets was just closed recently around just error handling. And so the next step is for them to try to send traffic again and see if they feel more comfortable in doing so. So that is with respect to Liquify. Specifically, obviously there are other gateways, and the only way to interact with Shannon will be through using those other gateways. So that is something that everyone will eventually have to use. There's also the accelerator participants. So they are also the apps and gateways that are going to be using this. Beyond that, my plan, I have a general plan around BD, which I'm going to start executing on next week, which is reaching out to just about everyone who's ever been a customer or is in our space. We have a lot, and also trying to get intros for the ones I don't have. Basically, setting the groundwork for saying that, hey, like, if you've used us, we have something new coming up. I just want to set up a conversation or just keep you warm and just start kind of doing the cold reach out annoying thing that does end up working over time in trying to get people to remember us if they stopped using us or to re-engage with us. We will couple that with some type of one-time use credit with respect to getting more apps to use us. So, like, in summary, yes, there are at least 6 other or 7 other apps or gateways that are using Path right now on Shannon. We do plan to reach out to others, but we do know we do have a larger swath of customers that we can reach out that are waiting for things like WebSockets to go live, or are waiting for better archival checks and things of that nature. And all of that does go live with Path. So the answer is yes, there should be an influx of gateways and apps. I don't know if they're going to quote unquote fly in as listed in the question, but they will be coming in over time. And it is basically my jobs and Fred's jobs on the growth side to make sure this happens. And we do spend a lot of time with talking to customers every week to make sure that this does happen. We do plan on doubling down on that as we get closer to the migration. Does the world care about open data, or does a catastrophic event need to happen? To be fair, a catastrophic event probably is what needs to happen. We were just joking about this last night. I think Fred and I were on a separate call, that black swan events tend to be the things that lead to people migrating to something like Pocket. Otherwise, they don't think about it. I think in general, it's one of those things where if we continue pushing and as we make it through out of this slump that we've been in for a few years, we will, it will show resilience and staying power. And as you've seen over the last few years, we will have been able to upgrade our entire tech stack, expand our offerings, and before the end of next quarter, expand beyond blockchains as well. So yeah, I think they may not care about open data right now, but eventually they will care about it because it will end up being more cost effective for them at the end of the day. Okay, next question. What happens after Shannon? That is more of a question for Olshansky. There is a roadmap. I don't really want to dive into that, but the one thing I'll say internally is that we've been viewing Pocket as basically like a universal API token moving forward. That's kind of mentioned that during the agents when I did my agents talk a couple times at the end of last year, that Pocket is basically a token that gives you access to unstoppable data across a whole plethora of APIs. And so that's kind of where I feel like we are going. And that's the narrative we're thinking of latching onto because it's naturally popping up that way. What else is there in here? Is Ripple going to open up their own gateway? No, that is not the plan. Ripple right now is in a position where their thesis is, or their narrative is, to decentralize. So they're interested in us because we offer them decentralized access, which is why they've latched onto us. Well, aside from that, they really like Fred and myself, but they really are trying to show that that Ripple is truly decentralized. And the reason being is their token, the XRP token on the original ledger, is not used for, to the best of my knowledge, for staking, and there is no mechanism where you get yield for holding the token. So they, that was kind of a downside for them, and it's not to no fault of their own, I guess. This is a 10-plus-year-old project. So they are trying to figure out if they can leverage other projects in the ecosystems to enable decentralization, and the XRPL EVM is one way of doing it. And Pocket's ability to decentralize API access is another way of doing it. So that's why we have a very close relationship with them, and we've been able to get to where we are at this point. Chart history. Okay. Very briefly on this one. At some point during the fundraiser that we did a long time ago, chart history has come up, and then it has come up again with various investors. I would say investors are like split. I don't know, unevenly split on chart history affecting us negatively or positively. It depends who you ask. We have some very large investors who are still holders, and we're talking like 8-9 figures in Pocket, who are of the belief that the chart history is a negative, and then we have one who says it doesn't really matter. It's utility and marketing that matters. So, it's to give you an example, it's very split on if chart history is doing us any favors or not. But if you if you take any of the, choose a bunch of random utility tokens that have a chart that is 2, 3, 4, 5 years old, you'll see that they more or less look like ours. Like there's a peak shortly after they either get listed or they launch, if they were launched on an exchange rather than OTC like us, and then they just kind of go down and to the right for a very extended period of time. And some of them are, fortunately, or not fortunately, some of them are either at their lows, like we've hit in the last couple of weeks again, or they are halfway there, halfway being a couple cents away from the perspective there. So yeah, I would say the chart isn't doing us any favors, but it's a mixed bag, one way or the other. And I don't really have much more I can answer to that. So I'll just stop it there if you're looking for an honest answer. Is AI inference going to evolve? I can't answer this question because I don't know what that's getting at. Other use cases, is Coinbase enough? I would leave that to Jinx. Can PNF survive the big dip? I would leave that to Jinx and Kansu. And the last question is, what are private equity VC guys doing with their holdings? Some are not staking; they're just holding because they either didn't want to get into it. But many are staking and are staking with some of the bigger providers here. So that should answer that question. And that's it. Hopefully that answers that. I got maybe half the questions answered here.
Beautiful. And I think I can probably lean into answering some of the rest of them. B-Chain, I need you to mute, please. You got some background noise going on there. I'll give you a second to do that. Okay. Let's see here. The network could technically grow in traffic and users without the token budgeting for some time. What happens after Shannon? You heard a little bit of the Grove answer after that. So from the foundation perspective, the next year after Shannon is more or less a year of continued growth. All of the plans that we have right now are around rolling out additional core functionality for Shannon. Some of the things that we've talked about in the past require additional, modules or tooling to be built onto Shannon, either through Path or through other third-party libraries. So that's very much something that's on our radar, is continuing to build up the additional functionality. But also, one of the things that the foundation is focused on is, how do we make it as easy as possible for existing developers to access a broad number of data types? And so one of the things that is in our roadmap for this is subsidizing quick one-shot development packages which will open up a specific type of data request, essentially creating sort of working examples. And these would not be huge packages or big development that requires big teams and big subsidies or anything else. We're talking, a couple of small files in a zip package that gives a structured example of how to access a data type. And what I would like to do is just have a library as vast as possible of that, with a single website that indexes that and makes it easy to search, so that if you are looking to use Pocket in some way permissionlessly, we already have a good working example of how to get exactly the data that you're looking for. And I would love to incorporate tools like Swagger into this, where you can have, an example of a live example that can be played with and interacted with in order to see how that would work inside your app. And I think that for most very popular open source softwares out there, you have great examples of this, of them having already built that. And it's one thing that we don't really have. So we've been looking at how do we make it easier for developers? How do we provide better resources to developers? And having a library of example functionality is one of those things that I think is an important part of the post Shannon launch environment. Are people bullish on what is to come after that? I mean, that's obviously a very broad question that depends on who you ask. I think some of the people who are most plugged in are also most bullish. If you're a DGen who's just looking at a bag that has been beaten to shit by the market, then probably not. I certainly hear the lamentations and woes frequently from various aspects of the community. But for most of the big brains and a lot of the big wallets, they are all looking at post Shannon as being when Pocket begins to grow again and begins to take its rightful place in the ecosystem. Is the vision clear and understandable for what the future looks like beyond 2025, 2026 in terms of network evolution? I would say yes, definitively yes. A lot of times we've talked in phrases and narrative concepts that haven't really resonated or been easy to understand. I'll give an example: gateway verse. That's something that I think, perhaps resonates with some people who are heavy into infra and get that. But I don't think as a concept that it's something that has, sort of been broadly understood. And I think one of the things that we are shifting to as we start to talk about the future of a fully permissionless decentralized open data network is the idea of an app store. Everybody understands an app store. When iPhones first came out, App Store was empty, but Apple was doing its work to encourage developers to build there, including, subsidizing and incentivizing them. And it became a go-to spot where people knew they could invest time and money into building something there and to see a return on it. And the possibilities within that app store were both wide open and to some degree well documented. That's very much what we are working towards with Pocket, an app store of open data. And so any and all kinds of open data, including many types that haven't been thought about at all yet, are potentially accessible through that. And I'll give one example real quick. Research Coin is an example of a project that is incentivizing making your clinical research data accessible through a network and incentivizing that publishing through an internal token that is issued there. That's the kind of project that could be a slam dunk partner for a post Shannon Pocket, because all of the data that they are publishing from a research perspective could be made accessible through Pocket, and they would be incentivized to do so. And anyone using Pocket could use the Pocket token to access that library of data. That's one example. There are countless types. We've talked a lot about LLM use cases, and we're seeing those use cases explored by PGA teams. But anything that exists in an open data environment, especially open data with a decentralized architecture, is something where Pocket can be built right alongside it. So the vision, I think, moving into a post-Shannon world is very clear. Will Mike ever get a car, or will he ride scooters forever? I'm putting my bet in the scooters forever camp and or public transit. That very much fits his style and his desire to live lightly and be able to move and travel easily. La 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 la. Would the market respond to a hard supply cap and a deflationary tokenomic situation? I think this is a solid question, one that we've beat on multiple times. Will the market respond to a hard supply cap? Uh, I mean, maybe, but honestly, as much as this gets tossed around, there's two reasons why I don't particularly think it's anywhere near as important as people seem to think it is. One, the second and third most popular chains in the entire blockchain space have no supply cap. Ethereum and Solana have unlimited supply. They have the same infinity symbol next to their total supply cap that Pocket does, and ain't nobody saying shit about that. So clearly, it's not about a hard supply cap. It is fundamentally about, are the tokenomics predictable? Is the supply stable? And are emissions low enough and or deflationary enough to keep that being a predictable M1, M2 total money supply? And I think that's a far more important question than, do we have some arbitrary number that's plugged in there? Two, the fact that the entire protocol is fundamentally based on an emissionary reward structure, like most proof of stake networks, means that any published hard supply cap would be a bullshit number anyways. And I'll just call that for what it is. We could, create a hard supply cap, but how does that actually work in a hard mechanic? Emissions are the core of how the network works. What needs to happen is that burn needs to equal or exceed emissions to create an effective total supply cap. And that's the thing that I've pushed on and talked about extensively over the last couple of years, that an effective supply cap is far more important than a hard supply cap. There may be times, much like Ethereum, that emissions need to be adjusted. I think we've seen somewhere between 0.5 point to 2.5 points as a variable emission from Ethereum based on total transaction volumes and what are required to support that. But stable tokenomics that trend towards deflationary is what the most important aspect of that is, not a made up number that we wouldn't be able to effectively enforce anyways, given the structure of our network. What other use cases are people building that we have no idea about? Is there any? Is there a ton? This is part of what I was referring to earlier. There are tons and tons of possible use cases when we look at the ability to support any form of open data. The clinical research data is one that I've been digging into and talking to people about quite a bit. I think that, and I mentioned this on the podcast that I recorded yesterday, the ability for researchers around the world to have full access to the work that other researchers are doing is a massive use case that nobody's really figured out yet at all. The vast majority of clinical and other types of scientific research that's done now is done within the walled gardens of incredibly expensive subscription-based journals. Some of those journals are like 10 grand a year. And so what that does is it locks a lot of useful and necessary research data behind walls that the average, especially entry-level folks, just don't have access to in any meaningful way. So opening up all of the scientific data around the world is a gigantic, big vision kind of thing, but it really demonstrates like how we have barely touched what the possible use cases for open data are. And when we look at the future of Pocket in general, this is something that we've talked about since 2017, 2018. With enough time and enough evolution and enough adoption, Pocket becomes the phone lines. It becomes the connection points to open data that people don't even really think about, but they're used billions to trillions of times a day. And given that we have the ability to become the underpinning of all of that, yeah, Sci-Hub is a great example of that. Ramiro, good link. Like TCP/IP is I think one of the early examples that was used. Everybody uses TCP/IP. Every single retailer in the world, or retail user in the world of the internet, uses TCP/IP. The vast majority of them don't know what that is or that they are using it. And Pocket really has the potential to become something that is that broadly adopted, and we believe strongly in that vision. Is Coinbase enough? Will that come to fruition, or are we just working through their checklist with no real guarantee or backup plan? First, there are no guarantees at all with exchanges. Regulatory landscapes could change, any number of things that could happen. So, yeah, you don't get guarantees on that front. I certainly wouldn't offer one. We're doing this. We're taking the steps that are required to reach that qualification, and that's about as much as we can guarantee. That being said, or backup plan? No, absolutely not. We are not putting all of our eggs in one basket from we are only going for this and nothing else. We talked to our market maker again in our weekly meeting this morning, and part of what we talked about is what other tier one exchange paths look like and how we can potentially get there. Those conversations remain ongoing. Coinbase is just the clearest path on what needs to be accomplished outside of pure volume. The short answer on what would fast track us into any and all tier one exchanges is total trading volume, and that's not something that I don't think any of us have the ability to control on our own. So all we can do is keep pushing forward and hope to see the market respond. Can PNF survive the big dip we are in long enough to get to the Coinbase standards? That's also a good question, a fair question. We have seen, and if you're following the pro forma, I think you can see pretty clearly that Kansu's job has been to wield a chainsaw to expenses and figure out anywhere and everywhere that we can cut costs. If things continue to not improve and the markets at large continue to bleed as aggressively as they have, that would require additional and more painful cuts as the time went on, perhaps even to the point where some PNF folks might be working in a volunteer capacity to some degree. But I can tell you this, PNF will fight till the very end. I mean, we'll eat beans and rice until the cupboard's empty and keep doing the work that's required to get it across the line. We're all big believers in this, and we will prove that unless there is just absolutely no option possible. I don't see right now us being at huge risk of not being able to survive that. It does mean that some things, could potentially get streamlined or trimmed to the point of perhaps near uncomfortability. But we believe, along with Grove and along with our other ecosystem partners, that getting us across the line and getting us into that next generation is a big part of us being able to move forward and to see the growth that we've been waiting for, and we are all pushing hard as hell for it. Will the global economy crash and we all end up fighting for clear water? I certainly fucking hope not. I'm not a big fan of the idea of living in a Mad Max world. Although I probably would be a pretty hefty blood bag for anyone who required that. So, perhaps that's an alternate retirement plan for me. I think that takes us to the end of that list. So if anyone else has any open questions that you'd like to bring up, now's the time. And also, if you're not able to come off mute, you are welcome to add questions in the sidebar chat, and I'll read them out. seems like we've potentially answered everyone's questions. I'll let it go here for another minute or so, and always happy to give y'all some of y'all's day back. Beautiful. Well, again, please make sure that you check out those articles, listen to the podcast, and we appreciate everyone engaging with our content and spreading the message out there. I see RSS typing. Is that a last minute question? I'll give it a sec to get it in. And he stopped. All right. Well, thanks everybody, as always, for joining our weekly calls, and we will see you again next Wednesday, same time, same channel.